Hello everybody and welcome back. I've got another coronavirus craft for you today. This is, I think, like the second day or day and a half into shelter in place in Georgia, so I can't go a darn place. My dog, I noticed earlier, was playing with a really super chewed up toy, and I can't run out to Walmart and get him a new one. So I thought I'll put some of my sewing skills to use and I'll make him a new one. So I asked my younger son, James, what he thought I should make for Buddy to play with, and of course he said a wiener dog. So here we go. I've got some old paisley fabric that I grabbed out of the discount bin at Joann. I cut 2 squares about the same size out of it, and I ironed it flat. This particular piece is, let's see, it's about 14 inches long by about 12 inches wide, but you can make it any size you need for whatever size dog you're working with. So I have just traced out a rough shape of a dog on here. It's for the dog. It doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't really even know what I'm going for. So I've just kind of traced out the rough shape of the dog on here, and I'm going to cut out both of these pieces together with the dog on it. Let's just cut him out here. And it doesn't have to be exact, and you don't have to use any kind of special marking pen for this. I just used a Sharpie that I had laying around. Again, it's just for the dog, so he doesn't really care if you have marks on there or not. And he doesn't care if it's cut out perfectly either. If you mess it up, it's really not a big deal. And you know what? You could just make this a simple bone shape, or just a circle or a square, or, you know, any shape that tickles your fancy. You know, hey, make it look like a bottle of beer. Maybe that'll give you a giggle. I'm just kind of holding these 2 pieces together and cutting, but if you feel like you need to, you can also pin them together just to make sure that your pieces stay lined up together while you're cutting. I'm not cutting anything particularly big or complicated, and I've got pretty good fabric scissors, so it's not that big of a concern for me. So I'm almost done cutting this little shape out. And this is going to be a particularly kind of small toy because I have a particularly small dog. I have a dachshund, and he has, you know, kind of a smaller sized mouth, and so I don't want to make him a huge toy. If I was making this for, you know, a lab or something like that, I'd probably make it a lot bigger. So here is my cutout dachshund. Now right now I have got the wrong sides together. The inside is together. So the next thing that I want to do is flip this around and put the right sides together. So I'm going to do that. And this time, I probably should use a couple of pens just to hold it in place while I'm sewing. I'm just kind of pushing it around gently on the edges to get it lined up here the way I want it. Let's see. Okay, I've got it lined up the way I want it. So now that I've got it lined up, I'm just going to put a few little pins in here. I'm going to kind of put them in the middle of his body here just because I don't want to sew into a pin, and I'm just going to go around the edges here. So that's kind of the idea here. We're going to sew around the edges, but you want to make sure that you leave a space open a couple inches wide so that you can put the stuffing inside. Now I happen to have some stuffing on hand because I, you know, do a lot of different sewing projects with the boys. But if you don't have any stuffing, there are a lot of different things you can use. If you've got an old pillow laying around somewhere that you were meaning to throw out anyway, maybe even a throw pillow, you can use the stuffing out of that. Just cut it open, get the stuffing out. You could also use cotton balls, kind of, you know, pull them apart, fluff them up, and stuff them in there. You could also stuff your dog toy with crinkled up newspaper or tissue paper. Just know that if your dog is a serious chewer and you know he's going to pull the toy apart, just bear in mind that, you know, whatever you put in there is going to come back out. You could also put things maybe in there like pine straw too, you know, things that won't make your dog sick, of course. All right, so here we are. We've got them all pinned together. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew around the edges. All right, so I'm starting kind of midway up the dog's belly here, and I'm just going to do, this is going to be a pretty small margin around the edges here, maybe 1/8 of an inch, just because it's a small toy. But you can do it whatever width you feel comfortable with. I'm just going to do a straight stitch all the way around, except for those couple inches I'm leaving open to stuff. All right, I'm going to pull the pins out. See where I've sewn around the edge there? All right, we're going to take him back over to the table and we're going to turn him right side out. Okay, so I've got my little stuffed dog, well, soon to be stuffed dog, turned right side out. And here's the little belly hole right here. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my stuffing, just kind of fluffy stuffing, and I'm just going to shove it in there, and I'm going to try to fill in all the little nooks and crannies. Given his shape, I'm going to try to fill in his head and ears and his little legs first, and I'm going to move on to his tail and his back legs, just to make sure that I get all those areas filled in before working on the belly. So I'm kind of just pushing the stuffing in, and then I'm going to kind of work it on down, you know, however works best. Kind of work it into his head and into his little feet there. Just kind of packing it in. I want mine to be a pretty firm toy. If your dog is not like a big chewer or tends to like more fluffy, soft things, or maybe you're making a toy for a baby or a small child, then you can make yours a little looser. You just stuff it however much you feel like it needs to be stuffed. I want mine nice and firm like that. So, and you can see all that fluff that I put in there compacts down pretty small. So you definitely need more fluff than it looks like goes in here. So I've got his head stuffed. I'm going to stuff his leg. Just going to kind of poke it down in there. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually a little spot right there where I didn't sew it very well. So if you get to this part of your project and you realize, crud, I messed up that seam, it's okay. Don't panic. Just pull that stuffing out. Try to turn him right back, you know, inside out, just the part that you need to, and go back and put a stitch there. The other option is you could put a little bit of liquid stitch there, or you could just kind of hand stitch a couple of stitches there just to make sure your stuffing doesn't come out, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stitch that little bit right there closed by hand when I stitch his belly closed. So not a big deal, don't panic. Got legs, tail, almost done with the midsection here, so I'm just going to put a big old bunch of stuff in here in the middle to make sure he's nice and full. Maybe not so much. All right. All right, he's pretty much stuffed to my satisfaction. So once you've reached that point, you've got this hole here that you've got to close up. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. If you did not stuff this terribly full, you could actually take this back over to your sewing machine and just do a top stitch all the way around your toy to sew it up. I'm actually going to do mine by hand, so I'm going to thread my needle and I'm going to sew it up tight. Alright, I've got my needle threaded with just some all-purpose white thread, and I've just got it kind of double threaded here with a little knot at the end. And I'm not going to do any kind of fancy stitch here. I know that there is there are people who can use like the ladder stitch to stitch it invisibly so you can't see it, but like I mentioned before, it's a dog toy. I don't really care if he sees the stitching or not. So I'm going to do the stitching here on the outside so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I am going to start kind of from the inside here, so I'll pull the knot to the inside there so at least that part won't stick out, but I'm going to let you see my stitches here. I am not very good at hand stitching. This is not my thing. That's why I sew on the machine. So I'm just going to kind of do my best here, which if you're not a big sewer is what you're going to be doing too. Just the best you can. And you know what? That's okay. So I'm just kind of pushing it through each of the two sides and pulling it around. Just stitching over this opening. I'm going to close it up. No fancy technique here, I promise. The first like big project that I can remember sewing as an adult was just an apron, like a waist apron that I made for a costume that Cassidy wore in a play when she was a girl, and it made me feel really good about myself and really confident about my skills, and I kind of kept going. So just give it a shot. And you know what, if you make a mistake, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. You just learn from it. You do a little better the next time, right? Just like the next time I do this, I'm not going to make as complicated of a design quite this small. So here you can see my stitching right there where I have sewn it together. Nothing fancy, it's just closed. And I'm just going to make a little knot here to close it up. Oops. If I can keep my hand on it. Maybe I'll knot it twice just to be sure. Now don't forget, I had that boo-boo on the front leg. I've got to go back and fix it. So I'm going to put a new knot in my thread here because I think I've got enough left to fix that. And I'm going to fix it the same way that I sewed this shut. I'm just going to go over the top with a few stitches. See? There's that little boo-boo right there. And I'm just going to stitch it closed so the stuffing doesn't all come out at once. He'll get it out eventually, but not right away. I'm going to get this little tail off because it'll get in my way the whole time. Now this little part here is stuffed kind of tight, so I'm probably going to go back and stitch over it again just to be sure I don't have a problem later on with it opening up. It's a lot easier to go over it the second time when I'm not trying to hold it together, I'll tell you that. Alright, now we'll just shut that closed with a knot, tie it off. And voila, it is done. See there? Closed it up. And nobody has to know but us. So here's my little dog toy for my little dog. It's got a little bit of firmness to him. It's got a little tail. He's got some little edges to chew on. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you're inspired to go out and maybe try to make your own dog toy. Like I said, start off with something simple if you've never done it before. If you've got a few sewing projects under your belt, make something uniquely shaped. Make whatever you like. Make it teddy bear shaped. Make a, I don't know, a koala, a sloth, whatever you want. You can sew some little eyes on there with buttons if you want to, although be forewarned, the dog can chew them off. So Fun little project. It only took us a few minutes. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great day.